Welcome to the first of our pre-synod meetings. I know you're all really excited. Synods are this kind of, yes, synods are the kind of things that people are breaking down the doors of the church to get into. Right? I just feel like I should be doing the Las Vegas thing. I'm here all week to try the fish. Let us pray. Father, we offer you this evening that we might be edified and learn about our coming synod. Give us ears to hear and wise hearts to listen. Help us to understand what you are calling us to. Help us be patient with one another. Give us a clear vision of what you would have us do. This we ask in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Who's next? Over to Father Mike.
Thank you. Hey Mark, I think the speaker's picking up YouTube. Although I can speak louder than it's making noise. How many Anglicans does it take? Thank you. So I echo the Bishop's welcome as we gather here this evening to begin to flesh out to you in more detail our upcoming synod. I've been to synod for, well, really all my life, and growing up as a PK, having the chance to go to them even as a child, and I was a runner at General Synod and doing all sorts of things over the years, and have had the privilege of attending and co-chairing synod over the last number of years. But I must say to you, of all the synods I've attended and all the diocesan ones I've been part of the planning process for, I'm more excited about this synod than any I think I've been to before. I think the content, the people that are coming, the engagement that is being developed within the life of the church. I've always loved synod because we don't get together very often as a diocese. And it used to be every year, and as a synod co-chair, I'm kind of glad it's not anymore. But every 2 years, we at least have this opportunity to come together as a diocese, to be reminded that we're something more than our individual parts. We're also reminded we share a common vision, and the heart of that vision is the building up of God's kingdom in our communities and in our world. And I believe that the heart of this synod is that. It's talking about how do we do that together. And so I'm really excited about that and what lies ahead for all of us at Synod. And I'll be really excited and happy to welcome you on the 8th of May for our Synod service, and then the following couple of days as we work and share together at Synod. The agenda is before you. Now this is now the official agenda for our upcoming Synod. It was passed at Synod Council last night to be the one that we take to Synod itself to guide our process and our work together. A reminder, Thursday night. Thursday night is the Synod service, and the Bishop will give his charge at that service. And I want to highlight that because I've been surprised about how many people don't realize that the Synod service is open to anyone and everyone in the diocese who would like to come and share in a beautiful service of worship, but also to be a part of the work that we're all there to do together, and to catch a little bit of the spirit of the vision that we're working toward. And so I would please invite your parishioners, those who would like to go, let them know that they are invited, and we would very much look forward to welcoming them to that service on Thursday night. Friday is more or less a typical Friday with the business part of Synod broken up by a couple, three really significant pieces as well that are different. We have two presentations by folks that are there to do table displays. One from the Anglican Foundation, Dr. Scott Brubacher from the Foundation, and then from Forward Movement, Scott Gunn. And I'm going to say a little bit more about him when we get into the workshop leaders. Also, we have a presentation from Tyandanega, and our presenter is actually here today, just enjoying an opportunity to come and share with her Anglican brothers and sisters. So Kalina will be doing that, and Oski will be doing that at Synod, and we're really looking forward to that. And our guest speaker will give one presentation on Friday, and then pick more up on the other days. Archbishop Chris Harper is our reflector. He'll be there to watch our process, how we treat each other, how we talk and speak and grow together in our process at Synod. He'll come back on at the end of Synod to share his thoughts with us on Friday. And then after the blessing and dismissal, there's a social time at Queen's before we disappear to dinner times and other things that we're doing in the evening. Any questions just about Friday? Oh, you're wonderful people. Saturday, we gather back again, and this is more getting into the nuts and bolts of visioning and really speaking to the theme of Synod, communities of hope through disruptive grace. And so this is when we're going to really begin to hear about that from our plenary speaker, but also get a chance to talk about where we see glimpses of this disruptive grace at work. And we've invited 4 people to make presentations at workshops on Saturday. And the reason we've done it that way is it allows us to allow every person at Synod to attend each of the 4 workshops. You know, before you'd have to draw lots with your delegates and say, well, you go to this one and I'll go to that one, but there's no one to go to the third one, but we'll do our best. Well, now you get to go to all of them, and I think you'll find that they're all well worth taking the time to attend. The workshops are one by Archbishop Chris Harper, who's doing a workshop on the continued work on truth and reconciliation. We have Leeds Anglican Ministries who are coming to share something of their experience of moving out of the traditional church model into a much more community-based and community interactive model of ministry. We have our dear friend over here, Captain the Reverend, who will also be sharing with us the concern around human trafficking, which I imagine this has happened numbers of times to John, where people look at him and think, why do we need to be worried about that here? Well, you need to go to the workshop, and he will explain exactly why we need to be concerned about that, not only here, but throughout the world. And the last one is Scott Gunn. And Scott is the director of Forward Movement Publications, but he is also doing studies at a doctorate bishop that he's doing about evangelism in the modern context. Evangelism in the post-Christian era. And so he's coming to share something of what he's learned over the last couple of years researching and traveling around the world, and his thoughts around how we are being challenged and invited and encouraged by the Spirit to continue to do evangelism, to share the good news of the gospel with the communities and those we come into contact with in our life. At the end of Saturday, there's some closing worship with Bishop Millett and our Bishop William, and then Synod adjourns around 3:45 on Saturday. And so that's the basic outline. It's going to be a busy Synod. You know, I don't think we could squeeze one more little 5-minute piece into that, because it's a fulsome agenda. But it's full in meaningful, I think, and encouraging ways. So, the other thing, just to remind you too, If you're coming and staying at Synod, the portal is open for you to book space at Queen's, if that's what you'd like to do, to book a room. If you go to the diocesan website and click on the banner at the top for Synod 2025, it'll take you to that part of our website that is filled with all the information about Synod. And check it once in a while, because it does get revised and updated as we move forward. So just keep an eye on that. But to book rooms and those kinds of things, you can do that anytime. It's available and ready for you to do that. The other thing I would say is we learned a little bit from our last experience at Queen's University that having the residence and the meeting hall 35 miles apart was not a really helpful thing for most people. It might have been a little less than 35 miles, but boy, I'm old, I said miles. Oh dear. Oh my. I've really got to get my act together. And so it's all compacted right in that little section of Queen's near Banree. The parking, the residence, and our meeting space is all within a very, very short walk of each other. And all of the work together is taking place in the one building on the one floor. So much easier space for us. The first thing that we got excited about was the space, because it really is going to work for us better than a lot of the places we've been over the last number of years. So I'm excited for you to see that and come and share in that. Questions or comments? Sandra?
Michael, my apologies if you said this at the beginning and I didn't hear it. The registration on Thursday, that happens at the cathedral?
You may register at the cathedral, and if you either don't get that opportunity or aren't at that service, we do registration again on Friday morning at Queen's. So you can do either, I was going to say either or both, but you can't do both, but do either or, whichever works best into your timeline and what's going on around you. Well, thank you for allowing me to share with you tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to the bishop, who's going to talk to us about Bishop Rosemary Millette, who is our plenary speaker, and share a little bit of something about how we ended up encouraging and inviting her to come and be a part of our synod this year. So, Bishop. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Now, I hope some of you have watched some of the videos where Rosemary, it's actually Mallet. She's from Barbados. She's Bajan. And she is an amazing leader. I met her at Lambeth. We were in a Bible study group together, and we really hit it off. So if you saw how we were talking on the video in the calls, that's what Bible study was like. So you'd be like, oh my God, oh, and this too, and this too. And then she's, oh, and what about? So there was a real sense of excitement in our Bible studies at Lambeth. Rosemary is also a PhD and an academic, a sociologist. And she spent most of her life working in economic development in Tanzania, in Ethiopia, and in Barbados. She's actually a bit of a national hero in Barbados, because to be from Barbados and then go to England and become a bishop in the Church of England, and the Caribbean community in Toronto is going crazy trying to figure out a way to come and hear her, or see if they can kidnap her at the airport and at least have a party or have a dinner with her or something. Rosemary is incredibly engaging. She is one of, I think this is correct, 7 suffragan bishops who are members of the English House of Bishops. So in England, suffragan bishops aren't naturally a member of the House of Bishops. You have to be elected by your peers in order to be one of the 7. She's that. And then just 2 days ago, she and another bishop, Bishop Arun, were elected by the Church of England General Synod to be bishops in charge of racial reconciliation. So she's working, knowing her background in international development and her acumen in theology, combined with her work with the poorest parts in the south of London in Southwark Diocese. She's got an amazing combination of gifts and skills and can speak to this disruptive grace that we're talking about. She is a spectacular friend. We have spent a lot of hours sort of sitting. It was so hot. Oh my God, Lambeth was hot. It was the summer that it was like 38 degrees in England, and there's no air conditioning anywhere. So till the wee smalls, we would be sitting on benches outside just trying to catch some cool breezes. Rosemary will be here for 3 or 4 days beforehand, and I will be touring her around, so I might come to your church or come to your town and have her in tow to let her see a little bit of this part of the country. And then she will be flying back on Sunday night. So she will be with us at Synod. She will be with us at the cathedral the next morning for worship. Although she says, I will have talked enough, I just want to sit and listen. So I said, well, then you get me droning on at you. So she was fine with that too. And then I'll take her into Toronto and put her on the plane to go back to Southwark. Very excited that she's coming. And I am very proud to say that I've had a number of conversations with other bishops in the church saying, how did you get her? How did you get her? You know, I'm very proud. We're batting above our averages, or punching above our weight, or however you want to put it. Very excited. Do you want me to go? You already ran through the other presenters.
Unless there's something more you want to say, Bishop.
The one thing I want to say about Scott Gunn, how many of you have had or used a little book called Forward Day by Day? Okay, that is the Forward Day by Day. That's the group that Scott is the chairperson of, and he travels all around the world talking about evangelism, discipleship, prayer, and how to be better Christians at what we're doing. He is as thin as a rail and about a foot taller than me. I kid you not. You will not miss him in a crowd. He's also a professional musician. He started out as an organist. I'm guessing he never had trouble reaching the pedals. He is also one of the masterminds behind the Lent Madness game that you sometimes see on Facebook, where saints are voted on all the way through the Lenten season to get us up to Easter to see who wins the golden halo. And he's also the founder of the Advent Conspiracy. So he's a brilliant speaker, and he is currently finishing doctoral work on deeper discipleship and the ways in which Christian discipleship has got to change for the post-Christian world. And I can't believe we got him, but we got him. So he's going to come. He's going to come, I believe, the Tuesday before. And again, I'm going to make sure he sees some of the diocese and meets whoever I can find and take him around and feed him well and make sure he has a wonderful time and good memories of us here. So that was the other bit about Scott I wanted to share. I think that's all I have for this section. Are there any questions about our speaker?
So David?
Yeah. David, you're up next.
I'm going to move from the excitement of Synod to the nuts and bolts, which is about nominations and resolutions around that. Synod Council is composed of 3 representatives from each of our 4 deaneries, plus we often have the chair of the diocesan ACW, and then the bishop appoints 6 people. And among those 6 is the chair of the ACW. So that, and council meets monthly, except for we didn't meet last month because we didn't have enough of an agenda. So we were nice to ourselves and didn't meet for the sake of meeting, which is unusual in the church. So to do that, and it's on a staggered basis. So there is either one layperson and one clergy, or one lay or clergy person. So that's 3 people, and the terms are for 2 years, and Synod Council members can serve for 2 terms and then need to take a year off. So we try to provide continuity on the one hand, and on the other hand, to get new people involved in Synod Council. And there are very few people who have served for a very, very long time, which, unlike some parishes, but what we do is work with that, and we have at the beginning of Synod Council an orientation. There are enough people around who have been there previously that can be very helpful. And right now we are meeting at St. Paul's in downtown Kingston, which is, we have been meeting at St. Mark's in Berryfield, but then we were replaced with a ballet class. Martial arts. So anyway, the martial arts won because they paid rent. Anyway, so that's done. And we normally meet on the 4th Tuesday of the month, in basically September through the end of May, and often on June. In July and August we're off, and we work very hard not to meet in December, because all of those extravagant Advent parties are happening and people have their busy schedules. So that's where it is. You need to be a member of Synod, current member of Synod, in order to be on Synod Council. And if you are in the Leeds Grenville Deanery, this time there is an election for 1 clergy member. In the Frontenac Deanery, there is 1 clergy and 1 lay or clergy member. So you could have with that. And then in the Hastings Deanery is 1 clergy or lay member. So that means that if there's already a clergy and lay there, it's either or. And then Quinty is 1 clergy and 1 lay or clergy member. So is that very confusing for people? Okay, good. So just to try to get 3 people, 1 clergy, 1 lay, and 1 either clergy or lay. And we don't have any bivocational people, so that doesn't work with Synod Council. 2 years termed. We do not keep attendance, and most of these meetings are either online or in person. So people who live a distance, and you get to figure out whether it's a distance or not, you can go online or come in person. So, and we do have established quorums for every meeting, and there have been a few times that we've waited 5-10 minutes to be sure that we have enough people for quorum. So that attendance is important. There are 2 nomination forms. Excuse me. 2 nomination forms. One is, the easiest one is a nomination for someone else. And we had a person who wanted to run for Synod Council and said, but I'm too proud to nominate myself. Could I get somebody else to nominate me? I said, sure. We have a nomination form, and that individual fills out the form naming the other person. That full nomination form goes to the other person for them to fill out. Because, not that we don't trust people to list all the stellar qualities about nomination, but everyone ends up with a nomination form. There's a nominating committee that will meet after the 4th of April, right afterwards, to be sure that we have all of the vacancies filled. And if there is more than one person nominated, for example, a clergy or a lay position for a particular spot, then we will actually have conversations with those people, because we work hard to be sure everybody's included. So we might find a special niche for you, should you want one. But that, and it's Synod Council. I mean, it's not the most exciting meeting that you will go to in the month, but it could be.
Oh, Pshaw, they're all very exciting.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So anyway, and there are devotions that Synod Council members do. And that's the first nomination. The second nomination is a month and a half after our synod is General Synod, which is the synod for the whole Anglican Church of Canada. And we have been granted special dispensation to elect our members this close to it. And there's lots of information out about General Synod and logistics and so forth and so on. And we are all being put on hold. This year we found out that we are allowed 3 clergy and 3 lay people. It all depends on diocesan logistics and so forth and so on. And we are also allowed, of course, the bishop or bishops, depending on where it is, and also a youth representative. So we could have a total of 8 people, 3 clergy, 3 lay, and the bishop and a youth representative. Clergy, priest or deacon. So where it says clergy, you hear that as either priest or deacon. That is done. Back in the old days, it was only priest, and even before that, only male priest. And, but we're out of that at this point. Huh?
Hallelujah.
It's a pretty interesting General Synod with all men there, and the women get all their own washrooms. So that is done. But anyway, there's the forms. They're on your table so that you can complete and mail it in. There's an email address on each form that you can email it into the diocesan office, or you can bring it into the synod office, or you can hand it to me if you can find it. Questions on that? Okay. Second part, resolutions. The deadline for nominations is the 4th of April, which is next week. And if we get enough names for that, then that's done. Resolutions can be canon changes, they can be resolutions on a normal basis around that. There is a resolution form also on your table, and we ask that in addition to a mover, there be a seconder named on that form, and with the explanation of what this is about, where is the whereas clause and so forth and so on, the reason for that. If the resolution, we have a resolutions committee that will review these, if it asks that we spend $30,000 on each parish, that will go to the finance committee. So just to let you know that you cannot propose something that from a diocesan level doesn't make economic sense. And we've had different kinds of resolutions. We're still working with a resolution from the last synod on the blue community, which is about plastic bottles and so forth. That's gone through a number of iterations and so forth, and we've gotten some pieces about that resolved with that. But these are resolutions not just for this particular moment in time, although it could be, but for the church to understand and work through. And we ask that there not be any hate resolutions. Be it resolved that so-and-so be damned to hell and excommunicated. Those kind of things. Those don't go over well in the church. We'd love to think about it, but that's exactly it. So any questions on the resolutions? And again, any questions if you have about that, you can email, call me, do the other kinds of stuff. We can work with you through that and get it done. Thank you.
David, maybe I'll just mention too that if we do not receive the nominations or the resolutions prior to by the 4th,
Right.
then the planning committee then has to vet anything that comes in after the 4th, and then it goes to the floor of synod itself to determine whether synod has the desire to deal with those things. But it's vetted through planning committee and diocesan leadership. But ultimately, we don't make the decision about whether synod deals with it. Synod itself makes that decision, and we just bring that material with us. So try your best. I know the 4th isn't very far away, and may the 4th be with you as you do that. And but let's try to get them in on time so we don't have to worry about that at all, that we can bring everything as a package to Synod without any extra palaver. Okay, thanks, David.
Good. Anything else? Any other questions? Good. Who's next?
Just any general questions about what you've heard so far? Anything that you need to clarify? Well then, St. Alex is up.
Our CFO, St. Alex, tongue firmly in cheek.
That's right. Get this so the clicker's just up on the stand there. Well, good evening. And now for something somewhat different. So as we approach Synod, the finance topic is kind of a very broad one, and there's a lot of space we can work to. Which one do I want here, Mark?
Okay.
I'm pressing them
Could be
all.
line of sight, could be causing an issue. I'll advance it for you.
All right, I'll throw things at you.
Okay.
So the first thing, and this comes up every now and then, but this, where I'm focused, well, of course, we are the church, and we always have the context of faith and our mission, but this is primarily taking it from a financial lens. So you have to always be able to say, we have that piece, but it's also somewhat back to David's comment, that we have some great things, but how do we support them? How do we pay for them? How do we resource them? And so that's really some of the lens that this now starts to look through. So the goals as we work our way through, it's building the kingdom by supporting churches, ministry in churches, supporting the ministry within the diocese, and of course beyond the diocese. Administration and governance, and we just talked a lot about Synod Council, and Synod Council is the governance for the diocese between synods. So every 2 years we get together for 2 days. Outside of that, Synod Council is responsible for the governance. And then the other piece is around long-term viability and sustainability. And that's a piece that we've spent a lot more time on as we start to look at now. So the intention at Synod is to be able to provide kind of a 5-year view on some of the trends for some of the key areas. The 2025 first quarter actuals and the quarterly view. So each quarter we do what we call a view. It's a forecast for the rest of the year. So when we get to April, we'll take the March results and take those and add the budget for the rest of the year, and then make adjustments, because we know things are higher, lower, things have changed, and then that net comes out at the end of the year to what our forecast is for year end, and we call that the view. The investment fund, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Receivables, we have parishes that are working through viability plans under our policy, and those are reported at Synod. And then the 3-year operating plan. And part of, as we talked last Synod, part of the objective is to get our thinking, we kind of get focused on the next year. We're worried about this year's budget, next year's budget, and we get very focused in, and that often gets you into very tactical pieces. But we also need, particularly as times change, to have a longer term view. And that allows you to manage change, because change is much easier on a longer piece than waiting for things to constantly, once that knocks on my door, I'll deal with it. And so this is about trying to get ahead and be able to manage change in advance, to get the things we want and to avoid the things we don't. It's the need, as we look at our needs, what the old ones are, what the new ones are, and what the emerging needs are. And then again, looking at starting sooner to affect longer term change. And then finally, it's really focusing on where we put our resources. Because again, there's a million things we'd like to do. Right? I still think I should be driving a Bentley every morning to the diocesan office. It doesn't, unless we remortgage the house, it doesn't work so well. Can't live in the Bentley, Wendy told me that. So you look at what you can afford, what meets your need, and how that works going forward. I'm not going to dwell into this one too much, but there's always, when you do these things, and budgeting is an example, you can take a bottom-up perspective, and there's a process to start from the bottom, which is really starting with all of the pieces you have. That's generally been the approach we've taken, is that we start with all the detail from last year and the forecast, and we then build things back up and get at the top to an answer, and then you cut expenses or figure out how to increase income. And that's responding to the pieces you started from the bottom up. The other approach is starting from the top down, and that's by setting goals and then trying to work out how you get to them. And so that's there's a different, just a philosophical approach in terms of how you start and where you end. And this exercise we're trying to work through is really focused on a top down to be able to set those pieces and drive to them. Always that moment for a good graphic. So the church is always, we're always looking for a world-changing type event with all the bells and whistles, right? We always set out to get all the bells and all the whistles. But on the reality side is the budget will only pay for one bell and one whistle. So you have that reality as I said, it's like I'd like to drive a Bentley. But actually I'd like to be driven in a Bentley. But how we manage this is now managing our resources to what we're trying to do. So where we find ourselves when you step back from the operational pieces and take a bigger view, our situation, and one of the benefits for me, I spend a lot of time at the provincial level as well, and engage with other dioceses across the Anglican Church of Canada. Our situation is not particularly unique because across all the piece, we're dealing with the fact that with the things that we know, that the demographics that have changed, that the church attendance has changed. There's all the pieces, the view outward in, the access to fundraising, all of those things have affected every diocese. And every diocese, for some, there are dioceses that are on the very fine edge of bankruptcy. And some have lived on that edge for most of their existence. But as we approach it, we spend a fair bit of time talking about how are we dealing with it? What's the uniqueness? How do you handle things? Every diocese's circumstance is different, and every set of needs is different. So we've balanced the budget in 2025, but when we got to the back end of it, and we did have a December meeting. Nobody wants to meet in December for council, but we had not yet approved the budget. And what we did, and we had a number of factors, including the bishop's availability, we went and put what I call an overlay. It's also called a plug at the bottom that said, we know we're not quite to balance. We got 47K that we have to figure out how we're going to solve that. And we needed the bishop back. We had some things we had to kind of exercise and work our way through. If it dies, I hope we can give it a proper funeral. So we're still working through in the April view, which will come back to council in April. we'll work out where that 47K overlay is coming from. But basically, for the first time in a couple of years, we've balanced the budget in 2025. And there's been a lot of work that's gone into this, not only this year, but in prior years. But most of the things that are now in front of us to drive efficiencies and to drive savings out of, they're starting to get a lot smaller. And I'll talk a bit about that a bit more in a moment, but you start looking at, there's not the same proverbial low-hanging fruit to be able to go and do things that don't cause major change. And the other thing is we have, because income, you'll keep getting this theme, is one of the bigger factors. When you have basically income and expense, when the two are in balance, you have no deficit, you have no surplus. So if you're in a deficit situation, you have two choices. Spend less, bring in more. If you have a surplus, that's a higher grade problem to have, because then it's about, well, I can just spend more. But in our case, we're looking at new income. Again, not major pieces, but we have, last year we had rent from 3 Adelaide. There was a group that was focused on homelessness and reintegration of homeless people. And that program ran out of Adelaide, and we got enough rent to cover our costs, which was, again, accretive to the budget. We do get a little bit of rent because I'm on also as the provincial executive officer, so the province contributes to the diocese for a little bit of my overhead. We've introduced fees and expanded fees. And we're working right now, hopefully in the 1st of July, we will cut over doing the Diocese of Algoma's payroll. And right now they're paying ADP, who's one of the big payroll suppliers. And after working with their bishop and their treasurer, and the bishop also is the metropolitan, we wanted a test case, we wanted a pilot project for being able to share things across dioceses, right? Payroll it's got its complexities. In our case, dealing with the pension office has a whole lot of complexity to it because of the way our pensions are done. There's, EI, CPP, and all those kinds of things. But it's the same. It's the same, even though the Diocese of Toronto has slightly different policies, Diocese of Huron, Diocese of Niagara, Algoma, we decided we could do this. So we're going to basically pick up running their payroll in the second half of the year, and they will pay us for that service. So that'll bring a little additional income in for us. It's also a test for us in terms of driving across the province so the dioceses can start to share more. By doing so, we're also moving them right into our accounting system. We use Sage 300. And it sits in a Microsoft Azure cloud, which nice, safe, reliable space. And we will then share that with the Diocese of Algoma. Separate, so there's nice fences between Diocese of Algoma and Diocese of Ontario data. But we will now start working down that path. This is important to us as we go forward because we can save a fair bit as we go through the years. So you've heard this from me when we talk about insurance. But one of the struggles for us is that we are asset rich, but cash poor. We have all kinds of assets, right? Without even factoring in the land. There's over $250 million of buildings in this diocese. So there's a tremendous asset there. But the cash to maintain those buildings, the cash to maintain the clerical leadership, to maintain the admin, to maintain important things like organists, the other people that work in churches, all of those things, they're important. So all of those require cash. And at the end of the day, most churches in the diocese run on the cash basis of accounting. You can either run on an accrual basis, which is what most businesses do, what the diocese does, or you can run cash. And that means whatever comes in and whatever goes out is what gets booked, and you show that going out of the year. That also means, though, that if you're running a deficit, you're burning more cash than you're bringing in. Because everything in most of the church's budgets and financial statements is actual cash going in or out. We're not accruing for depreciation, we're not accruing for expenses that are already, there's a whole lot of things we do. Cash, cash, cash. And so as we work our way through, the cost of maintaining those buildings, the cost of protecting those buildings, those assets are wonderful, except they don't produce a lot of income. They don't produce cash. They consume it. And so, in this case, the financial planning in most churches, most of the treasurers you talk to have a little more sweat than they used to, right? Because it's getting tougher and tougher, and trying to balance and find the ways through. Diversifying the revenue sources, coming up with new sources of income, is a way to improve cash. And that sounds simple, but it's, as we know, how many of your churches rent out facilities some point in the year? Pretty much all, right? So that's an example of, and that helps bring in liquid, because you need liquid resources, like cash liquidity, to pay your bills. So we've done some things over the last number of years. We've talked about these before, but these were the big ticket items. These are the items where we went in and removed major consumers of cash, major consumers of expense at the diocesan level. Camp Hyanto, which again, way back when, was actually a net surplus situation. The church book room, 90 Johnson Street, the area it was in, was partly funded with surplus that was generated over the years in the book room. The last year the book room operated, we lost almost $150K. So we shifted, we took action. The national proportional gift was, at one time, this diocese was one of the few that actually provided at the percentage that the national church asks for. It's a gift, it's not a requirement. We've gone from over 400K to about 100K in the last 5 or 6 years. And then when we looked at 90 Johnson Street, beautiful heritage building, but it was going to require close to $1 million of capital to be able to deal with the things that had to be dealt with. And so we made that decision. So those were all pieces that drove that through. Go ahead, Mark. And where we're left with is a tightly squeezed in balanced budget. Tightly squeezed in. But as we go forward, and you look outwards to the churches and across the diocese, in many cases we have structural deficits. We have a number of churches that run deficits and have and will continue to. Demographics. Just the average age of people in church is not, it's not, when I look out in the congregation and I'd be in the youth group, that tells you something. But we've seen that shift. There's a lot of theories around a lot of things. But what it does is it affects not only the attendance in the pews, it affects giving, ultimately affects resources for mission too. We are heavily dependent on donations, right? There are churches out there that have business models, and they're not as heavily, but most of our churches are like reliant 90% or better on donations. And fundraising, and again, when I see a set of financials, you look at a church's financials, we had a church that was running at 30% fundraising. 30% of their income came from fundraising. That's a wonderful testament to the dedication of the people in that church. However, it's not sustainable. Basically, they tired themselves out. And what you saw is eventually people were just worn out. So fundraising is a piece, but we are very much dependent on donations. We've been selling some assets, but that's not fully a sustainable path, right? If I asked everyone in the room right now, have you got $10, Mr. Dean, do you have $10 of cash in your pocket? And if you did, and I said, great, can you give me that $10? Of course. And then I said, could you give me another 10? But again, there's a limited resource in the dean's pocket. The assets are the same thing. The good news is we get money when you sell them, but that's it. You don't have it anymore, you don't have the use of it anymore, and you can only sell it once. Inflation, anybody familiar with inflation? But basically just the upward pressure on prices for everything from heating oil to food, to staff services, to clergy grids, to everything gets affected by inflation. Pressure on facilities, right? We have a lot of buildings that take upkeep. And while they're, the usual upkeep of let's clean out the eave troughs, even though they're 100 feet up, but every so many years you got pointing, every so many years you've got roofs, you get furnaces, and all those things that require major injections of capital. We have a couple of churches going through major capital projects right now. And are they strenuous? Are those stressful type things? No, not at all. But the days of us being able to just turn to an internal capital campaign and raise $500,000, it's a lot tougher now. The political and economic volatility, do you think our world today is a little bit volatile? I mean, just today, Trump announced tariffs on 25% on cars. And the market, GM dropped, I think, 3 or 4%. Chrysler and their parent dropped 5 or 6. And you just see all the pressures and the volatility that are going on. And then, but at the same time, the demand for ministry program and support is increasing. So there's an issue to that there. So part of the way we solve it, and we've seen a significant uptick in the amount of money that's being withdrawn from the investment fund. And I look at this the same way that I do with the diocesan fund. Taking money out of investments, cashing in investments, doesn't solve the cash flow problem. Right? It buys you time. It solves the problem in a given window. It's sort of like going out in the meter in your car on the street in a parking spot, and you can put money in it. And when the time is up, you're now exposed to a ticket, and you got to put more money in. And so the real thing is that we need to do is think of this as buying time. Because the objective is to realize where we are, where we're going, and then using the time that's created by using investment money in terms of figuring out how to adjust. Otherwise, we run out of time and run out of money. So a number of just basic principles, looking to diversify the income sources, looking to continue to manage expenses, looking to continue to look for ways for innovative fundraising and stewardship strategies. Hey, if we can make money with an Advent game or a Lenten game or whatever, then let's do one for Epiphany, let's do one for, let's bring back Septuagesima and Quinquagesima and do all of that as well. But we need those innovative ways to get at it. We need to be very careful monitoring financial health. And then we need to work into the community to look to ways to share. And there's things going on now. We have churches that share congregations. There's, one of our churches here in Kingston, the United Church, worships in that church as well. In fact, there's joint services. And that flows money into that church. So there's a number of ways, you'll hear more about Leeds Anglican Ministries, but they gave up St. Luke's in Lyndhurst and now move about and use other facilities. But they focused on their thrift shop and the mission center that they have. So there's a variety of different ways that you can look at that, but finding ways in the community. So just when at the diocesan level, you kind of pull all that together. This is a little bit subjective based on the data we have, but the data shows, but the conclusions, you can argue, are subjective, but what we know is that parish income is continuing to decline. That's one of the reasons that churches are drawing money. Right? If the income is growing, you wouldn't need to go and draw money out of the investments to keep up with the bills. So we know church income, and that also 2 years later reflects on the diocese. We know there are churches that have closed, and we pretty much know there are some that will close in the next number of years as well. So all of that at the diocesan level, apart from all the other issues and challenges, it means that there's less coming in. Our investments, again, as we use more, there's less. It's the other challenge of using investments. If you take $10,000 out, 5% of that you get an income each year, you no longer get. If we can find a way to spend the money and still get investment income, you can sign us up. But that's one of those things that just doesn't work. Donations, we've actually seen some uptick. The diocesan level, some of that's our bishop at work. And some of it is that just donations of course, they're difficult to predict. And then external funding, we've seen some uptick, but this is where we need to bring more money in that is not in our budget today. And so if you look at it, most churches have those top five. Most churches have those things, or some combination of them. Donations, tithes, and offerings, grant money of one description or another, facility rentals, fundraising events, sales, etc., and endowments and investments. Pretty well every church has most of those. But there's also three other that we've put on the list that fit that other category. It's where the money comes in, and now part of our goal, a church-run business, a real estate development, which rather than selling the property, that you can actually, the idea being to stake into a partnership. Now, what do we know about building a multi-story tower for housing? Not a whole lot. Very little. That's not our business. That's not what we have. We may have the occasional person, but we don't have great expertise. What do we know about running that project? Same thing. What do we know about operating the business? Same thing. Property management. But if you step into one of these in a partnership, and you can then create where, for example, another firm as a partner would do the build-out, they would do the funding, and they would do the operation, and we would get an amount every month as rent or lease. And if you do that on a scale, then we can look to try and drive. This is not something every single church is going to be able to do. Right? There's not the use of the land, there's not facility, there's not a need, so all of those things, but we do have property that we can look at to be able to do that. Pretty much, we're looking at inflation being a factor in most of our areas of expense, and the cost of change, right? There's costs as we continue to realign things. That's what I've called change management. And then there's the cost of maintenance. So some of the work that's underway, well, we've started sharing discussions across the province. I mentioned the Algoma partnership. We've got a couple of others that we just talked about last week in our provincial meetings. We've set out to simplify the CMM calculation. I'm hoping that's going to come to council next month, but that will also address, some of the challenges we have today in terms of how long it takes, and the challenge for some churches in understanding what their CMM owing is. So the idea is to streamline that and get that a little tighter. As part of the exercise, we have an independent review going on of all of the properties in the diocese. So we have an outside company that's looking, that this is the business they're in, that looks and says, these are in that location or that type of location, there would be opportunity with a given company or a given type of company. It might be a retail thing, it might be an office space, it might be a dozen things. These guys, this is what they do for a living. The company has about $10 billion under management, so they do know what they're doing. So they're doing an assessment for us that'll point us to potential places to be able to work that, and then we can start discussions. Exploration of potential new income models, and where else we can now drive income other than what's coming in from the parishes. Continued work on ministry models and structures. Again, in every single church in the diocese, number one expense item is the cost of ministry, cost of clergy. The number two tends to be CMM or the building, maybe 2 and 3, and then after that, you get down to down to mission and programs and those things. So it's looking through how do we structure, and that's work that outside of my area, but looking at how does that now start to work. And then investigation as we continue to talk to other dioceses about what they're doing. The idea being, look for best practices, look for ideas, learn from those, where things have been the school of hard knocks. We don't need to get knocked. Look for that works. So we have a lot of good conversation going on across the 7 dioceses in this province, and then the national level as well. The other piece we're looking to do is this summer, the last number of years we've been successful with summer student grants, And we have dipped into Queens for business students, typically third going into fourth year, and had some very, very sharp people who chew up data, right? Like McDonald's fries. You know, and this is the student we had last summer. Anika was like constantly, I thought she was talking to herself at times. She was talking to ChatGPT and using it to build simulations, using it to build models, using it to construct stuff that what I'd given her to work on. She did it in a very different way. So the analysis we want to do is go in and look at the last 10 years of data. Look at the data by church and say, here's where we are. Here's where we were. Here's where we were farther back. Here's the trends. Here's the balances. And what's the data tell us? And how do we learn from that? And how do we pull data then that helps us plan going forward? And so that development of those trends and the models, which then lets you build a model of what viability looks like, and both in the short term, the medium term, the long term. So that, assuming, and we'll know in the next few weeks if we got summer funding, but assuming we do, we will again pick up we'll have 2 students, we hope, one in the archives, one in the business side. And I will put a little plug in there that we talked about cost savings. We're going to save a few $100s a month on our phone system. So we went from a very expensive arrangement where we leased a piece of equipment and bought trunks from Bell Canada. When we moved in the new center, we jumped over to a company called Ring Central that does it all in the cloud. We've now moved over to Microsoft. We are a big, as you know, we're a Microsoft shop, we're a Teams, and Teams has a phone system built in it. And for about a half the price of Ring Central, we are now using that, and that will save us money. Just as an extension of that, I'm hoping that in the fall we'll be able to talk. Most churches still have a phone, but what we've got here is potentially a much more inexpensive solution for that. So some of the churches could save money too if they wish. But we've done that kind of work, and we did that this time with a student. So our cathedral organist, Brad, is also one of the deans at St. Lawrence. We got a 7-week placement with a IT student out of St. Lawrence. And again, just an extremely sharp young lady that came in and did a whole pile of stuff for us. I mean, right from the phone system, Mr. Hauser now has a blob. If you look in the Microsoft world, when you use massive storage for storing pictures and videos and all that, they have this thing that's called a blob. And it basically just expands and contracts, and it's a big blob. It reminded me of a Star Trek episode when I first read the thing on it. But we've now got all that set up. So we've again been successful in getting free labor to do work for us. So yeah, so the summer students should give us some of this piece, and then we can come back out and share some of that hopefully in the fall. We did have questions last synod, and David made reference to some of the stuff with the investment fund. The investment fund, it's about $22 million, is managed by the investment committee, and the document that controls that is the investment policy statement, which once a year the investment committee goes through it, recommends updates, works with our advisors, and then council then approves the updated version. All of that includes things like ESG, environment, social, and governance, which includes some of the things we've talked in the past around like fossil fuel extraction and now water and bottle companies, etc. So we're going to run a session. CIBC Wood Gundy has an individual that looks at the ESG for everything in the portfolio. So there's actually in our quarterly statements now that we review a full write-up on what each company is doing, what targets they've set, what their achievements have been, and where they're headed with that. Some of them are actually quite surprising. So we're going to get together the investment committee, chaired by Peter Case, Canon Peter Case, together with Mo Johnson and his team, which includes Sophie Cook, who's the ESG specialist there. And we're going to do a web online meeting that will review all that and talk about that on April the 24th. So for anyone that wants to understand the investment plan, wants us to understand the implications on the environmental, social, and governance pieces, that meeting will be on April the 22nd at 2 p.m. And that'll be preparatory to the meeting. And so that kind of draws what we wanted. This intended now to, the time slot at Synod is somewhat limited. So we're going to kind of do a high-level piece of what the what that three-year plan looks like. That's a continually evolving thing, but we'll do where that is at. That's one of the reasons we've done this session online rather than ahead of Synod, because while it would be kind of neat to get into a 2-hour discussion about ESG, that may not be the best use of time for everyone at Synod. Right, Father?
Bless you, my son.
Thank you. I ask for absolution when needed. So that meeting is important, but yeah, coming through, we'll at Synod hit some of those items. We do not have our 2024 audited statements yet. Wilkinson's is working them through. We did not make the council meeting. We shoot for March, but some years we get there, some we don't. And so it'll be April this year. So those will be available before Synod. Those will go up on the website. Questions?
In the slide for ending or restructuring ministries, did I hear you correctly when you said you decreased the national church proportional gift from 400,000 to 100,000?
Over a number of years, yes.
Over a number of years.
Over a number of years, yeah. That's been, Wayne, help me, 5-6 years? We've sort of egged it down.
So how has that affected the national churches in
The national church has, if you follow the Anglican Journal, they have seen, we're not the only diocese that has done so. They've seen more and more pullback. Some of it is just based upon ability to do so, others because of other sets of issues. But the General Synod is working now to figure out part of what the work that'll come at General Synod and what COGS has been focused on is what can we afford going forward. One of the questions that was asked in the Primates Commission, if you read those 7 hypotheses, I'm not sure. But one of those was, do we need 3 levels of governance? Diocesan, provincial, and national. And there's all kinds of debate about that. They're working now through what they call the pathways to get there, and a lot of that will start to come up. And of course, we have a primatial election at General Synod. And there's question about the role of the primate, and is it, how does that change? I mean, we didn't always have a full-time primate, so that's a discussion as well. General Synod office sits downtown in the middle of Toronto, right? They're looking at moving, they're looking at a whole lot of things, but finance is a big issue there as well as the Council of the North. And I will put that plug in that General Synod COGS is proposing to reduce the support of the Council of the North, which is basically those dioceses in the North, and that's not just supporting neat things, that's supporting basic frontline ministry. And they're talking about significant cuts. That hit the floor at General Synod, our Provincial Synod last fall, and I can openly state that our bishop was one of the individuals that pushed that discussion. But we have a motion that was made there, which will now be carried to General Synod, that asking General Synod to reconsider that and look for ways to fund the Council of the North. So there are a number of things, but General Synod is a changing piece of work. I will turn it back to, as we always referred to him, the good canon. I'm not sure if that means we have a bad canon. I don't know.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, just a couple of closing items. One of the things I wanted just to encourage is if you've had your annual vestry but have not yet sent in the forms with your Synod delegates on it, please, 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 please. It takes a lot of time to put together all the details of the lists of Synod delegates and preparing materials and other things. There's a part of that same MailChimp response form online, your annual statistics and other things. That can wait, not very long. That can wait. We need your lay delegate information immediately. So please get that done. Also, just to remind you that 10 days before Synod, the Synod circular is sent. Just a message about lay delegates. One of the reasons why we set out that listserv message about pre-Synod meetings is we don't know who's been elected yet, to be able to send it directly to the Synod delegates. So that's one of the reasons why that went that way. So the Synod circular. And so we are working very hard to prepare that. That should be in the hands, and it goes specifically to members of Synod. So we need those names to be able to direct the information that Synod delegates need to engage in preparation for coming to Synod. I really hope that you'll take the time to, where possible, to watch either with your Synod delegates or your parish council the videos that are online. The 3 by Bishop Mallet, sorry Bishop, I was getting that wrong, so Bishop Mallet and Archbishop Chris Harper. And they are tremendous, and they're sets of questions for discussion and reflection. And so I hope that you'll take the time to do that. The videos are very, very good. The conversation between our bishop and Bishop Mallet are amazing. And but it does put before us the heart of the theme of Synod that we're coming together to discuss. So please, please take advantage of that, because it's a very important piece that we have available to us. Anything else, just as we kind of wrap things up on our agenda for tonight? I'm going to soon turn it over to the bishop, but I just want to say, as the co-chair of the Synod Planning Committee, thank you very, very much for your time tonight. And for those of you who have been with us on YouTube, we had at the highest, we had 39 people on YouTube tonight joining us at this meeting. So that's a significant group tonight in this discussion. I thank you for your time and energy in coming out and being a part of this. And I really look forward to the excitement and energy of Synod as we come back together again in May. So blessings to you all. Thank you so much. And our bishop will
bless you and send you home.
We hope. Thank you, Bishop.
Some questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you again for your time. We always used to say at the end of 3 Cantors concerts, thank you for the gift of the one thing we can never return, your time. It's important work. So, may Christ, the great Sun of righteousness, shine upon you, scatter the darkness from your path, and brighten your hearts with holiness. The blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be upon you to stay and remain with you now and forevermore.
Amen.
Safe home.